No bride survived more than 7 days with the Half-Apache rancher, until Ruth did. Ruth had grown up in a small town, a place where the streets were quiet, the air smelled of grass and dust, and people knew each other by name. She had always dreamed of something bigger than the life around her, something wild and real, something that would test her in ways she had never imagined. From a young age, she had listened to stories of the Half-Apache rancher, a man who lived far beyond the town, in a sprawling ranch hidden among hills and forests. People spoke of him in whispers, warning that no bride had ever lasted more than 7 days with him. Some said he was too harsh, others said he was too proud, and a few even whispered about his temper. But Ruth was not afraid. Instead, she was drawn to the mystery, to the untamed nature of the ranch and the man who ruled it. There was a spark in her heart that told her she could survive where others had failed. The journey to the ranch was long and tiring. Ruth rode in a small carriage, the wheels crunching over gravel roads as the landscape slowly changed. Trees grew taller, the wind carried the smell of pine and earth, and the hills seemed to rise endlessly toward the sky. For hours, she watched the land, her heart beating faster with every turn of the road. She imagined the ranch, wide pastures, horses galloping freely, cattle grazing peacefully, and a large, solid house where the rancher lived. Every story she had heard about him added a new layer of anticipation. He was known as a man who demanded respect, a man who lived by his own rules, and a man who tested everyone who came near him. Ruth knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she welcomed the challenge. When the carriage finally arrived at the ranch, Ruth was struck by the sight before her. The land was immense, stretching beyond what her eyes could see. Rolling hills were dotted with wildflowers, and tall trees swayed gently in the breeze. The house was sturdy and simple, built to last, with wide porches and strong wooden beams. Horses grazed in the fields, their tails flicking, ears moving at every sound. Ruth felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. She could almost sense the rancher watching her from somewhere nearby, assessing her even before they had met. The air seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a promise of both challenge and adventure. Ruth stepped out of the carriage, taking in the surroundings. The sun was warm on her face, and she could hear the soft sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the clatter of hooves, and the distant call of birds. Her heart raced as she approached the front door. She had rehearsed what she would say, but as she reached the steps, she realized that no words could truly prepare her for what was coming. She straightened her posture, took a deep breath, and knocked. The door opened slowly, and there he stood. The rancher was a tall man, his presence commanding without a single word. His hair was dark, slightly long, and his skin showed the sun and wind of countless days spent outdoors. His eyes were sharp, almost piercing, as if they could see everything, even thoughts that were not spoken. Ruth felt a shiver run through her body, not of fear, but of recognition. This was a man who had seen life in its rawest form, a man who had faced challenges that few could understand. His expression was serious, and he did not smile. Instead, he studied her carefully, as if weighing her worth, testing her resolve without speaking. "Ruth," he said finally, his voice calm but strong, "you've come." "Yes," Ruth replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I came to learn, to help, and to stay." He nodded slowly, but his eyes remained unreadable. Ruth could tell immediately that she would have to prove herself. This was not a man who accepted things easily. Everything here had a purpose, every action mattered, and respect was earned, not given. The rancher stepped aside, allowing her to enter the house. Inside, the air was cooler, the scent of leather, wood, and earth surrounding her. The walls were decorated simply, with tools, saddles, and a few family photographs. Everything spoke of a life lived fully in the outdoors, a life of responsibility, discipline, and quiet pride. Ruth followed him as he showed her around the house. She learned where she would sleep, where the kitchen was, and where chores were done. Everything was orderly, precise, and functional. She realized quickly that this was a place where there was no room for laziness or carelessness. The rancher's expectations were high, but not unreasonable. They were meant to shape her, to teach her how to survive and thrive in this new world. As the day passed, Ruth was introduced to the ranch itself. She saw horses, cattle, and fences that stretched endlessly across the fields. Workers moved about, performing their tasks with practiced skill. The rancher observed quietly, watching Ruth's reactions. When she asked questions or offered help, he responded with brief instructions, testing her patience and determination. She could feel the weight of history in the land, the generations of people who had worked hard, the struggles of weather and survival, and the strength it took to maintain such a place. Every detail mattered, and Ruth understood that her life here would be defined by respect for the work, the land, and the people who cared for it. By the evening, Ruth was exhausted but not defeated. She had helped feed the horses, checked fences, and even assisted with a few chores in the barn. The rancher watched her closely, noting her persistence, her attention to detail, and her willingness to learn. She stumbled at times, made mistakes, and struggled with unfamiliar tasks, but she never gave up. That mattered more than perfection. For the first time, she saw a flicker of approval in his eyes, a small but significant acknowledgement that she might survive longer than anyone else had. Dinner was simple but hearty. Ruth and the rancher ate in silence at first, the only sounds being the crackle of the fireplace and the occasional call of a cow or horse outside. Gradually, they began to talk. He asked about her life, her background, and why she had chosen to come here. She told him about her dreams, her desire to prove herself, and her curiosity about the ranch and its people. He listened, not interrupting, not judging, but carefully considering every word. Ruth could feel a connection forming, slow and cautious, built on honesty and determination rather than words or promises. That night, as Ruth lay in her small, simple room, she thought about the journey ahead. She knew that surviving here would not be easy. The rancher was demanding, the work was grueling, and the stories of failed brides weighed heavily on her mind. But she also knew that she had a chance to be different. She could face the challenges with courage, respect, and determination. She could learn from him, understand him, and earn a place in this world that few had managed to reach. Outside, the ranch was quiet. The stars shone brightly, and the wind whispered through the trees. Ruth felt a sense of calm mixed with anticipation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new lessons. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready. She had arrived at the ranch not as a visitor, not as a guest, but as someone willing to fight for her place, to face fear and uncertainty, and to prove that she could survive where others had failed. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought of the stories she had heard, the warnings from the town, and the legend of the Half-Apache rancher. They did not frighten her. Instead, they fueled her determination. She would not be like the others. She would not leave after 7 days. She would endure, she would learn, and she would earn the trust and respect of the man whose reputation was feared by all. In that quiet, peaceful night, Ruth made a silent promise to herself. She would survive, she would thrive, and she would be the one who stayed. The rancher, in his own room nearby, looked out at the same stars. He had seen many like her, young, determined, hopeful, but few who truly had the spirit to match the demands of his life. He did not know yet whether Ruth would succeed, but he could sense something different about her. There was a fire, a determination, and a quiet courage that set her apart. He turned away from the window, a faint hint of curiosity and respect in his eyes. The journey had begun, and neither of them could predict where it would lead, but one thing was certain. This first day had changed everything. The night was long, the ranch silent, and the air filled with possibilities. For Ruth, the first day was just the beginning of a journey that would test her strength, patience, and heart. She did not yet know the full weight of the challenge ahead, but she welcomed it with open arms. The story of the Half-Apache rancher and his brides was about to face its greatest test, and Ruth was ready to rise to it. The next morning, Ruth woke early. The sun was just rising, spilling gold across the hills and fields of the ranch. She could hear the soft sounds of the animals waking, the lowing of cattle, the neighing of horses, and the flapping of birds' wings. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, her heart racing with anticipation. Today would be her first full day on the ranch, and she knew it would not be easy. The work here was not like anything she had done before. It was physical, demanding, and required careful attention to detail, but Ruth was determined. She would not let the stories of failed brides scare her. She had come to learn, to endure, and to prove herself. The rancher was already outside, moving with a quiet purpose. He was tending to the horses, brushing their coats and checking their hooves. His movements were precise, calm, and confident. Ruth watched him for a moment, feeling both awe and a flicker of fear. This was a man who clearly knew what he was doing, a man who expected discipline and skill. She took a deep breath and approached him. "Good morning," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He looked up, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Morning, ready to start?" "Yes," Ruth replied, nodding firmly. "I'm ready to help." He gave a small nod, then handed her a brush. "Start with that horse over there," he instructed. "Be careful with him, he's sensitive." Ruth moved toward the horse, feeling the weight of responsibility. She had brushed horses before, but not one as large and temperamental as this. She spoke softly to it, moving slowly and carefully, trying to calm the animal as she brushed its coat. The rancher watched silently, making no comment, but she could feel his attention on her every movement. One wrong motion could anger the horse, and one mistake could earn disapproval. Ruth focused, steadying her hands and breathing slowly. By the time she finished, the horse was calm, its coat shiny and smooth. The rancher finally spoke. "Not bad," he said quietly. "Keep going." Ruth felt a small surge of pride. Even a simple word of praise from him meant a lot. She moved on to the next task, feeding the other horses and checking the water troughs. Every step required focus and care. She learned quickly that nothing on this ranch could be done half-heartedly. The land, the animals, and the work demanded full attention. Mistakes could be costly, even if not dangerous, and respect had to be earned through effort and dedication. As the morning passed, Ruth was introduced to more chores. She helped mend fences, gathered firewood, and learned to move cattle from one pasture to another. The rancher observed her closely, giving instructions in his quiet, firm way. He rarely raised his voice, but his presence alone made her aware of the importance of each action. He corrected her gently when she made mistakes, showing her how to do things properly without embarrassment or anger. Ruth appreciated this method. She could feel that he valued skill and patience more than speed or perfection. The other workers on the ranch were curious about Ruth. They had seen many young women arrive, only to leave within days. Some whispered doubts, while others watched quietly, waiting to see if she would succeed. Ruth did not let their whispers bother her. She focused on her work, learning from each task and observing the way the rancher interacted with the land and animals. She noticed small things, the way he approached the horses, the way he handled tools, and the way he moved through the fields with careful attention. Every detail mattered, and she absorbed it like a sponge. By noon, Ruth was tired but determined. She had sweated through multiple chores, her hands blistered and her arms sore. The sun beat down on her and the wind carried dust and hay into her hair and clothes, but she did not complain. Instead, she paused for a moment, taking in the view of the ranch. The hills rolled endlessly, dotted with trees, animals, and fences. The land was beautiful, alive, and full of challenges. Ruth felt a sense of pride. She was here, working alongside the rancher, proving that she could endure the difficulties that had driven others away. During lunch, the rancher and Ruth sat outside on a wooden bench, eating simple bread, cheese, and fruit. The air was warm and the sounds of the ranch surrounded them. Ruth tried to make conversation, asking about the land, the animals, and how he had learned to manage the ranch. The rancher answered briefly, carefully, but there was a small softness in his tone that Ruth had not noticed before. She sensed that he was testing her, seeing how she would react to his words and the way he spoke. After lunch, a new challenge awaited her. The rancher led Ruth to a group of young horses in a small pen. "They need training," he said. "They're restless. Help me calm them down." Ruth approached the horses cautiously. They shifted and stamped their hooves, their eyes wide and alert. She remembered the way the rancher had worked with the first horse in the morning. Speaking softly, moving slowly, she approached them one by one. It was not easy. One horse shied back, nearly knocking her over. Ruth held her ground, speaking calmly and gently until the animal relaxed. The rancher watched, his expression unreadable, but she could sense a small approval in the way he nodded occasionally. By the late afternoon, Ruth had learned more than she had ever imagined in a single day. She understood the rhythm of the ranch, the importance of patience, and the value of careful observation. She had made mistakes, but she had learned from them quickly. The rancher began to treat her differently, giving her slightly more freedom, testing her judgment, and watching her adapt to each new task. She felt a quiet pride in herself, knowing that she was slowly earning his respect. But the day was not without its trials. A sudden storm rolled in from the west, bringing strong winds and dark clouds. Ruth and the rancher had to secure the animals and protect the fences. The wind tore at their clothes and rain soaked them quickly, but they worked together efficiently. Ruth lifted heavy gates, tied ropes, and helped move horses to safer pens. Her strength and determination impressed the rancher, who rarely showed outward signs of emotion. By the time the storm passed, both were soaked and exhausted, but the animals were safe and the ranch was secure. As the evening approached, Ruth returned to the house, her clothes muddy, her hands raw, but her heart full. She felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. The rancher offered a rare smile, small but genuine, acknowledging her hard work. They sat together, sharing a quiet moment in the fading light. Ruth realized that this day had changed something inside her. She was no longer just a visitor. She was part of the ranch, learning its ways, earning its trust, and beginning to understand the man who ruled it. That night, as Ruth lay in her small room, she thought about everything she had learned. The rancher was more than his reputation. He was demanding, yes, but fair. He expected hard work, patience, and respect, but he also recognized courage and determination. Ruth understood that surviving here would require more than strength. It would require heart, observation, and persistence. She made a promise to herself to continue learning, to remain patient, and to earn the place she wanted on this ranch. Outside, the ranch was quiet. The animals had settled for the night, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. The rancher stood on the porch, looking out at the darkened fields. He reflected on the day, noting Ruth's progress, her determination, and her willingness to face challenges. He had seen many come and go, but there was something different about her. She did not fear hard work. She did not complain, and she had a sharp mind that learned quickly. For the first time in a long while, he felt a small curiosity about how far she could go. The night passed slowly, filled with the sounds of distant animals and the rustling of the wind. Ruth slept lightly, dreaming of horses, fields, and the work ahead. She felt tired but not defeated, exhausted but motivated. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new lessons. But she was ready. She had survived her first full day, and she had proven something to herself and to the rancher. When morning came again, Ruth awoke before the sun, eager to continue. She dressed quickly, stepping outside into the crisp air, ready for the next day's work. The rancher was already moving through the fields, as always, his presence calm yet commanding. Ruth joined him, ready to face whatever tasks awaited her. The journey was far from over, but she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. She had survived the first test, and she would continue to endure, learn, and prove herself on this ranch where no bride had lasted more than 7 days, until now. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, painting the hills with shades of gold and orange. Ruth woke before the light touched the trees, feeling a mixture of excitement and determination. Yesterday had been exhausting, yet it had been a day of discovery. She had learned the rhythms of the ranch, the value of patience, and the weight of responsibility. Today, she knew, would test her in new ways. The rancher had already started moving through the fields when she stepped outside. He was quiet, his eyes scanning the land as if reading its secrets. Ruth had learned to respect his silence. He spoke little, but his actions communicated everything. She joined him, picking up a bundle of ropes for the morning chores. The rancher handed her a set of instructions for the day: feeding the animals, repairing a section of fence that had weakened, and helping train a group of young horses that had been restless since the storm. Ruth listened carefully, nodding as he spoke, memorizing every detail. She had realized by now that the rancher measured everything: the way she approached tasks, the steadiness of her hands, and even the calmness of her voice when facing animals. Today, she would show him that she was capable not only of physical work, but also of understanding the subtle ways of the ranch. The morning began with the animals. Ruth fed the horses, careful to follow the precise routines the rancher had taught her. She brushed them slowly, speaking softly, and noticed how each horse reacted differently. Some were gentle, accepting her touch immediately, while others were skittish, needing more patience. Ruth had learned that commanding respect with kindness worked better than force. The rancher observed her quietly, occasionally adjusting her grip or stance, but he let her find her rhythm. By mid-morning, Ruth was already noticing small changes in the way the horses responded to her. They seemed calmer, more willing to trust her, and she felt a quiet satisfaction. Next, they moved to the fence. The section that needed repair had been loosened by the storm. Ruth lifted heavy wooden posts, hammered nails with precision, and tied strong ropes to reinforce the barriers. Her arms ached and sweat dripped from her forehead, but she did not complain. The rancher moved alongside her, giving brief advice, correcting mistakes silently, and demonstrating techniques when necessary. Ruth admired the way he worked. Every movement had purpose, every action careful and efficient. She realized that survival on this ranch required more than strength. It required intelligence, attention to detail, and patience. By the time the fence was secure, Ruth felt both exhausted and proud. After a short break, the rancher led her to the young horses. They were spirited and unpredictable, restless from the storm. Ruth approached them cautiously, remembering the lessons of patience and observation. One horse kicked suddenly, causing her to step back quickly, but she stayed calm, speaking in a soothing voice. Slowly she gained their trust, moving among them with steady hands and gentle words. The rancher watched from a distance, noting her progress. There was a faint, approving look in his eyes, though he did not speak. Ruth understood that this silent acknowledgement was significant. He rarely gave praise, but when it came, it was earned. As the morning turned into afternoon, Ruth began to notice small details about the rancher that others might have missed. He moved with care, but never hurried. He handled every task with thoughtfulness and respect for the animals and land. Even in his silence, there was a lesson in everything he did. Ruth felt a growing admiration, not just for his skills, but for the life he had built, a life of discipline, hard work, and quiet pride. She began to understand why so many had failed before her. The ranch demanded respect, endurance, and understanding. It was not enough to be strong or determined. One had to be wise and patient as well. Lunch was quiet but comforting. Ruth and the rancher ate simple bread, cheese, and fresh fruit on the porch. the wind carrying the scent of grass and hay. For the first time, the rancher spoke more openly, sharing a story of his childhood. He described learning the ways of the ranch from his father, the hardships of long winters, and the lessons of responsibility he had carried into adulthood. Ruth listened intently, realizing that the man's stern exterior hid a depth of experience and wisdom. She asked questions, careful not to intrude, and he answered, revealing just enough to let her glimpse his life without exposing all his secrets. After lunch, a new task awaited, preparing the fields for planting. The soil needed turning, rocks cleared, and irrigation checked. Ruth rolled up her sleeves and worked alongside the rancher, lifting, digging, and arranging with care. He guided her when necessary, but allowed her to make decisions, testing her judgment and problem-solving skills. Ruth began to feel a deeper connection to the ranch, as if each action she took was part of a larger rhythm she had yet to fully understand. She realized that the rancher was not just teaching her to work, he was teaching her to think, observe, and adapt. By late afternoon, Ruth faced one of her biggest challenges yet. A horse had slipped near the fence, panicking and refusing to calm down. Ruth approached slowly, remembering the techniques she had learned. The horse whinnied, stamping its hooves, but Ruth stayed calm, speaking softly and moving with purpose. Step by step, she gained its trust, guiding it back to safety. The rancher watched closely, his expression unreadable, yet she felt a small sense of pride. She had not only managed the horse but had done so with patience and courage, qualities the rancher valued above all else. As the day drew to a close, Ruth and the rancher returned to the house, both tired but satisfied. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled, and the wind carried a soft whisper through the trees. Ruth felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. She had faced challenges, learned new skills, and survived the tests of the day. More importantly, she had begun to understand the rancher, not just his demands but his values, his patience, and the quiet pride that guided every action he took. That evening, the rancher invited Ruth to sit with him on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The sky was painted with shades of pink, orange, and purple, and the ranch seemed peaceful after a long day. Ruth felt a sense of calm, realizing that this place, with all its challenges, was becoming familiar, even comforting. They spoke briefly about the day, the tasks completed, and the progress made. The rancher's words were few, but Ruth noticed a subtle shift, a small recognition of her growing skill, patience, and understanding. After dinner, Ruth returned to her room, reflecting on the day's events. She had learned more than she had imagined, about the ranch, about the animals, and about herself. She realized that surviving here would require more than strength. It would require empathy, careful observation, and a willingness to learn from every experience. She felt a quiet pride in herself, knowing that she had faced the challenges without complaint, with patience, and with determination. She was slowly earning the respect of the rancher, and in doing so, she was discovering her own resilience and courage. As she prepared for bed, Ruth thought about the other women who had come to the ranch and left within days. She understood now why they had failed, not because they were weak, but because they had not understood the deeper rhythm of life here. The ranch demanded more than physical strength. It required heart, intelligence, patience, and courage. Ruth felt a sense of purpose. She was here for more than survival. She was here to learn, to grow, and to earn her place on this land. Outside, the rancher stood on the porch, looking out at the darkened fields. The stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky. He thought about Ruth, her determination, her willingness to face challenges, and her ability to learn quickly. He had seen many try and fail, but there was something different about her. She approached each task with seriousness and thought, yet her heart remained open and curious. He did not yet know how far she would go, but he sensed that she could become something rare and valuable, a companion, a partner, someone who truly understood the demands and beauty of the ranch. The night passed quietly, filled with the soft sounds of distant animals and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Ruth slept lightly, dreaming of horses, fields, and the work ahead. She felt tired but not defeated, exhausted but motivated. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to prove herself. She had survived the first 2 days, and she was determined to continue, learning and growing with each task, each observation, and each interaction with the rancher. The morning came again, bringing light and possibility. Ruth rose with the sun, ready to face another day of work, another day of learning, and another day of earning her place. The rancher was already moving through the fields, calm and confident, a figure of quiet strength. Ruth joined him, carrying tools and ropes, ready to meet the challenges ahead. She knew that the days would grow harder, the tasks more complex, and the expectations higher. But she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. She was learning the ways of the ranch, understanding the man who ruled it, and discovering her own strength. She had survived the first full days, earning small acknowledgments and glimpses of respect from the rancher. But she knew the journey was far from over. More challenges awaited, tests of courage, intelligence, and patience. Yet Ruth welcomed them all, ready to endure, to learn, and to prove that she could succeed where others had failed. She had begun to understand the true rhythm of life on the ranch, the combination of hard work, respect, observation, and heart. And with every sunrise, she felt closer to becoming not just a guest or a visitor, but a part of this land, this ranch, and the life of the Half-Apache rancher. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a warm, golden glow over the rolling hills. Ruth woke with a sense of anticipation and nervous excitement. Today would not be like the previous days. She had grown more comfortable with the work, more confident in her abilities, and more aware of the rancher's expectations. But there was a tension in the air that hinted something significant was about to happen. She could feel it in the breeze, in the quiet movements of the animals, and in the serious way the rancher greeted her that morning. "Ruth," he said, his voice calm but firm, "today will test more than your strength. It will test your heart and your patience." Ruth nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. She had learned that life on this ranch was about more than chores. It was about responsibility, judgment, courage, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. She felt a mix of determination and nervous energy. Whatever challenge awaited, she was ready to face it. The first task of the day involved checking the irrigation system in the lower pastures. After the storm a few days ago, some channels had shifted, and the water was not reaching certain fields properly. Ruth worked alongside the rancher, carrying tools and ropes, moving between the ditches and channels with care. She observed him closely, noticing every small detail. The way he tested the flow of water, how he adjusted the channels, and how he planned ahead to prevent future problems. Ruth realized that survival and success on the ranch required not just hard work, but careful observation and thoughtful action. Mid-morning brought a more immediate challenge. A calf had wandered away from its mother and was trapped near the edge of a small ravine. Ruth's heart skipped a beat as she saw the frightened animal struggling to stay upright. Without hesitation, she ran toward it, speaking softly to calm it while carefully moving closer. The rancher followed behind, his presence steady and reassuring. Ruth remembered everything she had learned about animals, the patience, the gentle touch, and the importance of speaking calmly. Slowly, she guided the calf back to safer ground, lifting it when necessary and supporting it until it reunited with its mother. The rancher watched silently, but Ruth could sense a shift in his eyes. There was respect there, quiet but unmistakable. Not many had approached challenges with this combination of courage, calmness, and care. Ruth felt a surge of pride. She had proven to herself that she could handle even the unexpected crises of the ranch. The afternoon brought an even greater test. One of the fences near the upper pasture had broken during the storm, and a group of horses had escaped. Ruth and the rancher had to round them up before they wandered too far or caused damage. The task was physically demanding. She ran across uneven ground, dodging branches and tall grass, her hands scraped and arms tired, as she helped guide the horses back toward the ranch. The animals were wary, restless, and difficult to control, but Ruth remained patient, remembering every lesson from previous days. The rancher moved beside her, giving brief instructions and guiding her actions with subtle corrections. By late afternoon, the horses were finally secured. Ruth's muscles ached, sweat drenched her clothes, and her hands were sore from handling ropes and tools. But the satisfaction she felt was unlike anything she had experienced. She had faced danger, tested her skills, and succeeded. More importantly, she had done so with patience, courage, and a calm mind. The rancher nodded at her, a faint, approving look in his eyes. For Ruth, this was more meaningful than any praise. She was earning trust, understanding, and respect in a way that words could never capture. However, the greatest challenge was yet to come. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the rancher gathered Ruth and explained that a sudden issue had arisen. A neighboring rancher had reported that a herd of cattle was approaching from a nearby field, threatening to stray onto their property. The rancher instructed Ruth to help him guide the herd safely back to the correct pasture. This task required quick thinking, coordination, and courage. It was no small challenge for anyone, let alone a newcomer to the ranch. Ruth's heart pounded as they approached the field where the cattle were grazing. The animals were large, strong, and moving quickly. Ruth had to position herself carefully, moving alongside the rancher, calling out instructions and guiding the herd with calm authority. One cow broke away, heading toward a dangerous slope, and Ruth had to act quickly. She ran toward it, speaking in a firm but gentle voice, her hands extended to steer it safely. The rancher moved beside her, supporting her actions without taking over. Together, they worked as a team, their movements synchronized and precise. Hours passed in a blur of action and concentration. Ruth's arms burned from handling ropes, her legs ached from running, and her chest heaved with exertion. But she did not falter. She had learned to control her fear, to focus on the task, and to remain calm under pressure. Slowly the herd was guided to safety, the cattle finally settling in the correct pasture. Ruth collapsed against the fence, exhausted but triumphant. The rancher stood beside her, his expression serious but with a subtle, rare softness in his eyes. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Few could have managed it without panic." Ruth felt a wave of relief and pride. She had faced not only physical challenges but also emotional ones, fear, uncertainty, and pressure, and had succeeded. She realized that surviving the ranch required more than strength or skill. It required courage, patience, heart, and the ability to think clearly under stress. Today, she had proven to herself and to the rancher that she possessed all of these qualities. As evening approached, Ruth and the rancher returned to the house. Both were tired and covered in dust and sweat, but the sense of accomplishment was palpable. Ruth began to understand something important. The rancher's tests were not meant to punish her. They were meant to teach her, to guide her, and to show her what was necessary to live and thrive on the ranch. Each challenge revealed more about the land, the animals, and the rancher himself. She was learning not only to survive but to think, observe, and act with wisdom and care. Dinner was quiet, a simple meal of bread, vegetables, and freshly prepared stew. Ruth and the rancher ate slowly, the silence filled with shared understanding rather than words. Ruth felt a new level of connection with him. She could see the respect forming between them, subtle but growing. For the first time, she sensed that she was no longer just a guest or a newcomer. She was becoming part of the rhythm of the ranch, part of the life the rancher had built and protected. Later, As Ruth cleaned up after dinner, the rancher spoke again, this time more openly. He shared a story about a time when he had faced a dangerous storm alone, working to protect the land and the animals. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of emotion beneath it. Ruth listened, realizing that he had rarely shared these stories with anyone. She felt honored that he trusted her with this glimpse into his life, understanding that trust was something earned here, not freely given. The night fell quietly over the ranch, stars sparkling brightly in the clear sky. Ruth prepared for bed, her body exhausted but her spirit energized. She had faced her greatest challenges yet and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to the ranch and the rancher. She thought about the other brides who had failed and realized that their difficulties were not just about hard work. They had not understood the deeper lessons of the ranch, the importance of patience, observation, courage, and heart. Ruth knew that she had taken her first steps toward mastering these lessons, earning a place in a world that had once seemed impossible. Outside, the rancher stood on the porch, looking at the stars. He reflected on Ruth's growth, her resilience, and her courage. Few people had the combination of heart, intelligence, and determination that she had displayed today. He had seen many try and fail, but Ruth had faced challenges head-on, without fear, with calmness and purpose. For the first time, he allowed himself a quiet thought. Perhaps she was different. Perhaps she was the one who could succeed where others had not. The night passed quietly, filled with the gentle sounds of animals settling in for sleep and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Ruth slept lightly, dreaming of horses, fields, and the challenges of the day. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had proven herself capable in ways that went beyond physical strength. She had demonstrated courage, patience, intelligence, and heart, the qualities that mattered most on this ranch. When the sun rose the next morning, Ruth awoke with renewed energy. She was ready for whatever the day would bring. The past days had taught her much, but the journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to earn respect and trust, but Ruth felt confident that she could face them all. She had proven to herself that she could handle the hardest days, survive the tests, and earn a place on the ranch. The rancher, already moving through the fields, noticed her approach. There was a subtle nod, a recognition of her strength, courage, and determination. Ruth knew that the greatest challenge of all had not been the work itself, but proving her heart, patience, and resilience. She had done so, and in the process, had begun to forge a bond with the rancher built on trust, respect, and understanding. Today marked a turning point. Ruth had survived the most difficult tests yet, and she knew that the path ahead, though still challenging, would continue to offer opportunities to grow, learn, and earn her place. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and exhaustion, and she had come through stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. The ranch and its keeper had begun to accept her, and she had begun to understand the true rhythm of life in this place, where no bride had lasted more than 7 days, until now. The sun rose over the ranch, filling the hills with a warm golden light that reflected off the grazing animals and the rolling fields. Ruth woke with a sense of calm confidence. She had survived the toughest challenges of the past days, earned respect through hard work and courage, and learned the rhythms of the ranch. Today, she felt, would be the day that would determine her place, not just in the eyes of the rancher, but in the life she had chosen for herself. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back, and stepped outside to join him. The rancher was already moving through the fields, his posture steady and purposeful. He glanced at her, a faint acknowledgement in his eyes. "Ready for the day?" he asked quietly. Ruth nodded. "Yes, I'm ready." There was a seriousness in his tone that made her heart beat faster. She had learned that this calm voice could carry weight far greater than any raised tone. Today, the tasks would test more than her strength. They would test her judgment, courage, and understanding of the ranch's life. The first task was tending to the older horses. One of the mares had recently given birth, and the rancher wanted Ruth to assist in caring for the newborn foal and the mother. Ruth approached the animals slowly, speaking softly. She had learned the importance of patience and calmness, and she applied it carefully. The foal nuzzled her hands, and she smiled quietly, feeling a connection to the animals that was deeper than she had expected. The rancher watched silently, noting how naturally she handled the situation, how her presence calmed both mare and foal. Next, they moved to check the fences that separated the pastures. A section near the far hills had been weakened during recent storms, and it was vital to secure it. Ruth carried heavy wooden posts and rolled thick ropes with determination. The rancher guided her only when necessary, allowing her to make decisions about placement and tension. Ruth felt a sense of pride in her work. Each task she completed made her feel more a part of this ranch, more connected to the life it represented, and more worthy of the rancher's trust. By mid-morning, the rancher led Ruth to a challenging area of the property, a steep slope where a small herd of cattle had wandered near the rocks. It was risky terrain, and she needed to be cautious. Ruth approached slowly, observing the animals' movements, predicting their reactions, and guiding them gently back toward safer ground. One calf broke from the group and ran toward a narrow ledge. Without hesitation, Ruth ran after it, using everything she had learned about patience, calmness, and timing. The rancher followed closely, his presence steady and supportive. Together, they guided the calf safely back, and Ruth felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond physical relief. She had learned to trust her instincts, think quickly, and act decisively. After a brief lunch, the rancher spoke to her in a way he had not before. "You've done well," he said quietly. "Not many have the patience, courage, and understanding to handle the ranch as you do, but today there's one final test." Ruth's heart skipped a beat. She had faced many challenges, but she understood that this was the moment that could define everything. "What is it?" she asked. "There's a storm coming tonight," he said. "Strong winds, heavy rain. We need to prepare the ranch and ensure the animals are safe. I need your help to make sure everything is secure." Ruth nodded, determination settling over her like a shield. She had faced storms before, both literal and metaphorical, and she was ready to act. Together, they worked tirelessly throughout the afternoon, reinforcing fences, checking gates, securing feed and water, and guiding the animals to safer areas. The wind began to pick up, carrying the scent of rain, and Ruth felt the adrenaline surge in her veins. Every movement mattered. Every decision could prevent disaster. As the storm arrived, rain began to fall in heavy sheets. Ruth and the rancher continued working, soaked to the bone, but neither complained. The animals were restless, and she had to remain calm, speaking softly and moving with purpose. She felt a strange sense of connection to the rancher in these moments, a partnership built not on words, but on shared action, trust, and determination. Together they moved as a single unit, handling the chaos with precision and care. Hours passed and the storm raged on. Ruth's muscles ached, her clothes were drenched, and fatigue pressed against her body. Yet she refused to stop. She had learned that strength alone was not enough. Patience, observation, and courage mattered just as much. She guided the last of the animals to safety, double-checked the fences, and ensured the water channels were secure. The rancher worked beside her, his movements calm, his eyes observing her actions with quiet admiration. When the storm finally passed in the early hours of the night, the ranch was intact, the animals safe, and both Ruth and the rancher stood together, drenched but victorious. Ruth's heart pounded with exhaustion, yet a profound sense of accomplishment filled her. She had faced the ultimate challenge and had succeeded. More importantly, she had done so with courage, intelligence, and heart, the qualities the rancher valued above all else. For the first time, he spoke more openly, his voice carrying a hint of warmth. "You've proven yourself, Ruth, not just in strength or skill, but in heart, patience, and courage. I've seen many come and go, but you have earned your place here." Ruth felt a surge of emotion. All the hard work, the long days, the tests and challenges, they had led to this moment. She realized that she had not only survived the ranch but had begun to belong to it. She had earned the trust of the rancher and had proven herself worthy of life here in a way that no other bride had before her. The next morning, the ranch felt different. Ruth moved through the fields with a quiet confidence, the rancher watching her with a new respect. She handled the animals with ease, made decisions about the work without hesitation, and moved through the chores with a sense of purpose. The workers noticed the change as well. Whispers of admiration replaced doubt, and Ruth felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Over the next few days, the bond between Ruth and the rancher grew stronger. They worked side by side, sharing tasks, solving problems, and learning from each other. The rancher began to share more about his life, the challenges he had faced growing up, the lessons learned from his parents, and the quiet pride he felt in maintaining the ranch. Ruth listened carefully, offering her thoughts when appropriate, and he began to see her not just as a capable worker, but as a partner who understood the land, the animals, and the values he held dear. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ruth and the rancher stood together on the porch, looking out over the fields. The air was calm, the animals settled, and the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Ruth felt a sense of peace and belonging. She had faced every challenge, endured every test, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. She had earned her place not through force or argument, but through patience, courage, and heart. The rancher looked at her, a rare softness in his eyes. "You are different from the others," he said quietly. "You have stayed, you have learned, and you have understood what it takes to live here. I respect you for that, and I trust you completely." Ruth felt her heart swell. This acknowledgement meant more than any praise or reward. It was the recognition she had been striving for, the proof that she belonged here. She had survived where others had failed, not just because of determination, but because of her willingness to learn, observe, and care deeply about the life around her. In the following days, Ruth continued to grow into her role. She managed the chores efficiently, cared for the animals with skill and compassion, and worked alongside the rancher as an equal. Their partnership became natural, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. The rancher trusted her decisions, and Ruth relied on his guidance, creating a balance that made the ranch run smoothly. The townspeople began to notice the change as well. Whispers that had once predicted failure now spoke of Ruth's resilience, intelligence, and courage. She had not only survived the ranch, but she had also become a symbol of determination and respect, someone who could thrive in a place where few had succeeded. One quiet evening, Ruth stood beside the rancher on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. The air was cool and calm, filled with the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She realized how far she had come, from the nervous newcomer who had arrived unsure of what awaited her, to a confident woman who had earned trust, respect, and belonging. She felt a deep sense of pride and satisfaction. The rancher turned to her, his voice calm but carrying warmth. "You stayed," he said simply. "You faced every challenge, learned every lesson, and understood what it means to be part of this life. You have earned more than I could have expected." Ruth smiled, feeling a sense of triumph and peace. She had proven to herself that courage, patience, and heart could overcome any challenge. She had faced the fears and uncertainties that had driven others away, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully part of the ranch and the life it represented. As the stars began to twinkle above the hills, Ruth and the rancher stood together, side by side, looking out over the land they both cared for. The journey had been long, challenging, and full of lessons, but it had led to a place of trust, understanding, and belonging. Ruth knew that she had found not just a home, but a life built on respect, courage, and shared purpose. She had survived where no bride had lasted more than 7 days, and in doing so, she had created a future full of hope, partnership, and enduring trust. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled, and the wind whispered softly through the trees. Ruth felt a deep connection to this land, the rancher, and the life she had chosen. She had faced challenges, endured hardships, and proven herself in every way. Now she was no longer just a visitor or a guest. She was part of the rhythm, heart, and future of the ranch. She had survived, thrived, and finally belonged.